Welcome to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I am with Eliza Victoria and Mervin Malonzo, and we are talking about After Lambana, which has an international release. It's already out, right?
Yeah, I think it's out in the
Yes.
Philippines, but I think internationally, like North America will get it a bit later, like in June or something. Yeah.
Which will be closer to the time that this goes up. Okay.
Oh, good.
Okay. First question, guys. What individually, why do you love comics? Let's start with Mervin.
Okay. Um, I think I love comics because I like the interplay between the words and the images. I think I enjoy reading the medium, the comic medium, because it's um um yeah, I think it's fun for me as a kid when I first encountered my first comic. It made me read more because there are pictures that makes it easier for me to understand what's happening. So I think that's the first time that I fell in love with it. And then after a few years when I grew up, I realized that there are many things that the interplay of words and images can tell, especially since it's a different medium from for example, a movie. There are things that you can do in comic that you can't do in a movie, for example, or in a book, for example. So I think I fall in love with with that kind of thing. Um, yeah, I think that's it. That's basically it. I think the figuring out of what's happening and yeah, and then when you figure it out, it's really what do you call it, fulfilling for me as a reader. So and then as a writer, an artist as well, the way to figure out the flow of the story using only words and text, it's really a puzzle that's really um, uh, uh, very entertaining for me to do, and then very I really have fun stories through this medium. So yeah, I think that's basically it. That's what I find um, comics so lovable. That's how I find comics so lovable as a medium, as an art medium.
Do you remember your first comic?
Yeah, it's I found it accidentally. It's we move around. We move houses around. We only rent houses as a kid, and there's this house that left a copy of Funny Comics. It's anthology of comics
Yeah.
in Filipino, in Tagalog. And then yeah, I found it. In the cover there's a robot figure that really attracted me because as a kid I really liked things like that, robots and anime and cartoons. So when I open it, I really got sucked into the world. So yeah, that's my first comic, and then I asked my father to get it every Friday for me. Since then, so but the Funny Comics was discontinued when I was in high school. So
Yeah.
uh, I think that's one of the reasons why I chose to do my own comic, because I want to help bring it back here in the Philippines.
Eliza, why do you love comics?
Yep. So in terms of reader agency and I guess the role of the reader in transforming a story, the comics, I guess if it's on a spectrum, it lies in between the traditional novel and the traditional way of watching a movie. With the novel, you only have language, you only have words. Whereas with the movie, if you go to the cinema, time is taken away from you. You can't pause it. I'm talking about the traditional way
Yeah.
of watching a movie,
Mhm.
not Netflix or anything. You can pause it, you can stop the story, and the visuals are already there for you. You know how the characters look, and you know how they sound. You know how the environment looks with the characters in it. Whereas the comic is like in between these two mediums, you can control the flow of time, and even though you're shown the characters and the environment, you still have, there's still space for the reader to sort of transform the story, whichever way he or she wants to accept it. So I think that's why I love comics that way, as a reader and also as a creator. Yeah.
Do you remember your first comic?
I think it's also funny comics. Yeah.
Wow.
Because those comics are quite cheap. You can just buy them
Was
wherever
it
as a
10
child.
pesos back then?
Yeah, yeah, or five.
That's 5 pesos, I think.
5 pesos. Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
remember. Yeah, even cheaper. And other than funny comics, there are also anthologies of horror stories, local horror stories. So I really love those as a child. Yeah. And I also would pull out like the comic section of newspapers back when people still read newspapers.
Oh, like especially Philippine Star. Colored-
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I would do that. And my parents owned like a store, and we would get like old newspapers that we would sell, I guess, to people who needs it for recycling and all that. And I would pull out comics from those stacks so they won't get sold. Yeah, and I'll just read them.
So why did you decide to make comics? Who were the main influences that made you decide you were going to start making comics? Eliza, you can...
Um Yeah, it's funny because I'm primarily a writer of prose and poetry, and I remember sitting in Comic Con. I'm a big fan of comics and local comic creators. Sitting at the table in Comic Con and people walking past the table and going through my books and thinking that they're comics, and then seeing the disappointment on their faces when they see that it's just prose. I'm sorry. Yeah, and then that got me thinking. There's a segment of the reading population locally that I still haven't introduced myself to. So I'm thinking this is a way to introduce myself, to create a comic book. In terms of inspiration, I would say the Sandman series by Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
That's an eye opener for me. Just a way of telling a story beyond the superhero trope that we're so, that
Is
we
he
know so much
is
about.
he
Yeah.
also an influence in your prose writing?
Um, I guess I could say yeah. But there are also other
Yeah.
other writers that influence me. But I would say yes.
Okay.
I have to say though, with Neil Gaiman, I was introduced to him through Sandman, and his prose sort of,
Mm.
I think his comic book work overshadowed his prose for me, personally. I like the Sandman books
I
a
agree.
lot. Yeah, right.
I agree.
Not to knock on Neil Gaiman, just saying. Yeah, and Alan Moore also. When I read Watchmen, that's also an eye opener. Um, it's funny because just being able to read so much comic books, it's like a way of like giving permission to you as a creator. Like you read this works and you're like, oh, you can do this. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah. So I think there are a lot more, and I'm just forgetting some of the titles and the names. But yeah, those are, I guess, my main inspirations.
I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might be biased, but I feel like comics more than any other medium gets a lot of people to go, yeah, I can make this. Because I feel like people don't watch movies and think, yeah, I can make this, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
about
that's
you?
true.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking maybe it's also like the bias initially with comics that it's just for kids.
Mhm.
Putting images and words together, it seems easy, but when you start doing it, it's really
Mhm. Mhm.
a lot of thought goes into that.
Mervin, you've been
Yeah.
making comics for a long time. You have a long time local comic called Tabi po.
Yeah.
Is it easy to put words and pictures together if you're doing the writing and the drawing yourself? Or let me put it
No,
another
it's not.
way. How much does Mervin Malonzo the artist hate Mervin Malonzo the writer?
I love this question.
like I don't know. I can't separate it. I think
Mm,
because with Tabi po actually I didn't plan it like how people would collab on comics. For example a writer writes it and then an artist creates the drawing. It's not
mm,
the way I did Tabi po and all my other comics because I try to do that but sometimes I I think it's better for to draw it directly and then because the with me as myself as the creator and as the writer and the artist, it's not I don't need the field to communicate the story via thumbnails to another
mm,
artist because it's me. So I don't need it's all in my head. The story's in my head. So sometimes I do it directly. I with Tabico actually I started with an image and then the story, but I started with an image to know the style that I'm gonna um uh, go with it, and then yeah I did the story frame by frame, panel by panel, and then sometimes the story changes depending on what I thought about at that moment that I'm drawing it. So uh, that's how I did Tabico. But there's a plan, there's a grand story plan, that grand outline in my head, but it's the details are changeable depending on how I draw it. Sometimes I don't plan the panel. Um, I just go with it. But after Tabico, after experiencing, after reading a lot of comics, also, I realized that some planning, especially when you're planning the page, the panels and the way it the way the flipping the pages reveal the next page. Um, I think that made me decide to have a bit of a plan. So that changed a bit. I think I do thumbnails now. Sometimes it's still in my head, but I try to do it in through thumbnailing. Also, I think uh, I find it uh, and the planning helps with the with when you where you put the text, the balloons, because sometimes I forgot I don't I couldn't visualize how long it's gonna be, the dialogue. Um uh so I think I made myself push myself to plan ahead because of that. So yeah, that's it. That's how I work, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but with projects like with Eliza, it's a little bit easier because there's for example with After Lambana, she actually emailed me the whole script when I said yes. So that's easier for me because it's already planned out, and also the way that Eliza wrote the script, it's really cinematic. I mean, what I mean is it's written like a movie, like a script, what they call it,
A screenplay.
what do you call that? Screenplay. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how she wrote it. So it's really the very detailed. So sometimes I edit it a bit to make it. I think I see the message, and then sometimes I um, I edit it a bit, but it's not but it's really laid out. So working with Eliza is really easy in terms of that. I worked with a lot of writers after that, after Eliza, but I think Eliza's really what they call OC about making it controlling every scene, every frame. So I like that. It's not a bad thing.
Well, we will get back to that in a bit because I completely skipped the question of who your main influences are when it comes to making
Oh,
comics.
okay. Yeah. I talked about the funny comics. So and then it was discontinued, and then I realized that I really wanted to do comics. So I studied art. I really pursued art in college so that I could do comics. So but then
I bet your
when
parents love
started,
that.
Majoring in
yes, yes.
painting.
My parents are really cool about it, but
Oh, that's
my
cool.
other relatives aren't. they want me to do nursing. So so but my parents are really cool about it. And then I also took scholarships, so that the
Yeah.
we can afford
Mm.
the what they call the tuition. And so when I decided to create my own comic, because it's I can't I don't want it, I don't want funny just one source of comic to be my inspiration. I wanted to research everything that's every comic. I actually wanted to do research on Philippine comics before, but it's not available.
It's hard.
I don't think
Yes.
there's it's hard really, but yeah, I think there's one site by Jerry Alangilan that's that he scans some
Yeah.
artworks, but not the whole comic. But I that's the extent of the research of Philippine comic that I did. So I really look for the other available materials from the bookstore. So I look at Watchmen and the works of Neil Gaiman as well, and yeah, and then I fell in love with them. Those two are really especially Alan Moore. He's
Mm.
really one of the best writer whose works are really influential. To I think maybe all of your interviewers mention him every
All
time.
of
So
them.
and in the
Yes.
interviewees pala, sorry.
Yeah. All of
And then
them. All of them.
yeah, all of them, right? So really, Alan Moore really pushes the medium of comic. He really does a lot of things that can't almost can't be done in other medium like cinema. So that's how I really fell in love with the comics, because there are, and also Alan Moore is not really writing um, about the usual what do you call it, superhero genre.
Yeah.
Or sometimes he subverts it, and
Yeah.
then but mostly it's not writing for kids. That's really good for me, because I really want to do a more mature kind of story using the comic medium, and I want to tell people that comic is not it's not tied to the superhero genre, right? It can contain a lot of stories as well, horror,
Yeah.
and also drama. So yeah, I think that's it. And then Alan Moore's really very very good in what they call it, the form, the experimenting with the form of comic.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
there's panel in Promethea. How do you pronounce that?
Promethea.
Anyway, in Promethea, that there's Mobius
Yeah.
Mm.
Mobius kind of paneling, and then yeah,
It just goes
in
forever. You can read it forever if
watch,
you want.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
In Watchmen as well, there's a comic within a comic. So I'm really in love with that expanding the 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 story through different things, and then um, pushing the envelope of what comic can do.
That's why
So
that's why
yeah,
movies
Alan
based
Moore.
that's why movies based on Alan Moore works are impossible. And
They just don't
Yes,
work.
because
they
because
say that.
because they don't work outside of comics. Elise, I feel this is a question for you. What
Yeah.
is your elevator pitch for After Lambana?
Um, in After Lambana, a man with a heart ailment that he believes is of magical origin reaches out to a friend who has connections in the black market underground magical community to find a cure to save his life.
And what inspired this story?
Um, it has a lot of inspirations, but maybe primarily I was reading about the Prohibition era. Just one of those days when you just deep dive into some esoteric topic. Yeah, so during Prohibition, where they prohibited the sale and consumption of alcohol, in a way to curb criminality. But what it did was just to um,
Make it
have
worse.
people find, yeah, make
Yeah.
it worse. So, yeah, people just found loopholes everywhere. For example, pharmacists can dispense whiskey as a cure for, I don't know, like the common cold or something. And then during Prohibition, there were suddenly a lot of pharmacists. So it's just, so I just found that really interesting. And then I just played with this: what if there is such a thing as a magical prohibition, and how will people find ways to find cures for something otherworldly? And another inspiration would be our own local faith healers, and the idea of the albularyo, the mangkukulam, that sort of thing, and also our own the Filipino perennial problems in social support and healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of those just combined and out came After Lambana.
And how did the two of you meet and start working on the story? I understand you already had the full script and then dumped it on Mervin.
Yes. Yeah. So Mervin and I have known each other, I guess, through the Comic Con community as well. I'm a fan of Tabi po. And I when I started writing the comic book script, I was thinking of Mervin as the artist, as my collaborator. So before dumping the script on him, I sent him a message first to see and pitch him, the elevator pitch that I just mentioned, to see if he's interested in the project. And when he said yes, I was elated because he's an amazing artist, and I think he will be able to bring the story to life in a way that no one else can, to be honest. So yeah, so when he said yes, I gave him the full script, and yeah.
Mervin, what did you think when you got the script?
Yeah, I was working on Tabi po during that time. Actually, it's a continuing work. So I really wanted to do another comic, especially by another writer. So it's perfect timing also, and I want the contrast of the story, especially in the setting, because Tabipo is mostly in the rural places, and it's set in the 19th century Philippines. So it's really different from the setting of After Lambana, and I want that because I want to do buildings and vehicles and the urban setting as well. So I really when I got it, I think that's an opportunity for me to do another thing that's different from Tabipo. And also I actually worked on the color. I did experimented on the color. I did experiment on the color of After Lambana. So that's something that's fun for me as well, because After Lamban has different dimensions in the world. So I color coded each world. So that's one part of the fun for me, and figuring out the how I'm gonna show the language of the what do you call it, Diwata or Encanto or
Diwata.
Iwata.
Diwata pa din. Okay. Yeah, so that's I think what made me really accept the project is really to experiment on the art side of comic making, because as I said, in Tabipo I do the writing as well. So with this one I can play around with the art side of comics. And also I'm familiar with Eliza's work as well before, because we're both, but at that time we're both published by Visprint. So
Yeah.
we're really connected that way. So I buy her books, and one of the books that were uh both together is I think Alternative Alamat.
Yes.
That's how I got introduced with Eliza's work, because she has a story there.
Yeah.
So we have a similar theme as well, because we both worked on Philippine mythology, Philippine creatures, folklore. So it's really a match. So that's it. I think that there's a lot of check in my list. So we
Yeah.
really I think it shows in Erlenbrand.
Yeah. And just to add to the when Mervin mentioned the script. So my script has page numbers, panel numbers, camera angles. So it's
Yes.
so I wanted it to be as easy for the artist as it is for me to visualize what's happening. And it's funny when Mervin mentioned speech balloons earlier. I remember looking at like a sample comic book script and counting the words of the
I hope
speech
you
in the
weren't
speech
looking at
balloon.
Alan's comic book scripts.
I don't think so. 'Cause
Okay.
that's like it's like
Yeah.
a word dump. Yeah. Yeah. So I
Mhm.
would like count the words in the appropriately sized speech balloons and then count the words in the script that I have just to make sure that when it appears on the panel, it won't just be, a
Wow.
wall of words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what
Yeah.
I did.
Eliza, I feel one of the interesting things about After Lambana is it starts not even in the middle of a story. It kind of starts at the end of something.
Mm,
And you fill in the world like as we go along, right? You don't, we see things on the graffiti that is
yes.
explained completely as we go along. Where does that come from? Where does that kind of organic world building come from? Because I like it. It makes it feel like I just got dumped into this world and I'm a
Mm.
tourist and I'm like, all right, I
Mhm.
don't know what's going on, but I'm sure it'll come to me eventually.
Yeah, so that's
Mhm.
also in the script. Like I would Mervin was able to add Easter eggs of his own in the background, but I would add descriptions of what the walls would have, for example, like what
Mhm.
words, what images would appear on the graffiti. Um that's why I enjoyed writing this comic book, like working with the medium, because you can put things in the background. The thing is, if I write like a traditional novel, anything like trying to hide something will just put a spotlight on the thing. Whereas with the comic book, you can play
Mm.
with world building that's not too loud.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That it can just be in the background. The reader can pick up on it or not, but it's just, yeah, like exactly, just walking through a world that's already built for you, and you can just look or not look. Yeah, it's up to you. So yeah.
Mervin, you mentioned the colors. That's one of the things that really pops up about this book. Can you take us through like why you picked the colors that you did?
Ah, okay. I was
And
reading
did
about
Eliza
how
have to
they.
approve
uh,
it?
And actually, no, no.
No.
She really wants me to play around with it, and she doesn't really um control how everything looks, except the characters, because she really wants attractive looking characters. So except that, but the other things, she, as long as it's not interfering with the story, as long as it's not distracting, she's okay with most of it. Um, what's the question again? The colors. Okay. I was reading about how Dave Gibbons chose the color for a Watchmen, and I think that kind of influenced me because I think with Watchmen they chose the usual colors of comic are the primary colors, red, yellow, blue, uh, and black, of course, and then and I think Dave Gibbons chose the secondary colors, the purple, the the violet, or something like that. But I wanted to after the man to have that what do you call it, a visual identity as well. So and my favorite complementary colors are red and green. So I chose that, and I chose red as the light source of or the light color of the whole book, of the whole world. So the night sky is red and then the shadows are green. So and I think I sketched first, or I digitally do a concept of it, and I really liked it. So that's why I went with it. And the other worlds, I chose other complementary colors. Complementary colors are in the color wheel. They're the most opposite colors. So red and green, and then in the Diwata world, the Lambana, I chose blue and orange. So I color coded each world, and then there's a pocket universe. I think I don't know if you call it that, Eliza, but there's
Mm.
a bubble universe in Earth. and I reversed the color of our earth in the so it's if the in the earth it's red is the light and green is the shadow. I reversed it and I made the green that is the green the lighting and then the shadow red in the pocket universe. And yeah, I think it worked and it really makes the comic different from other comics. So yeah, that's how I made it. It's really just me playing around and trying to figure out because I don't want I think in modern comics they don't use captions anymore. They don't use in the earth I think Marvel still
Yes.
uses it, but in we try to make the story flow naturally, and then so color coding the worlds makes the reader realize that it's another world. It's not the this setting. So yeah, we try to not use the what we call the caption of the meanwhile, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Meanwhile,
it helps the color code.
this is a great
And
cover.
thank
Yeah.
you, thank you.
I think you've seen the pictures from Fully Booked. It really stands out. It calls your attention to it.
Thank you.
My question is, look at that. Look at the production quality on this book. I'm sure you remember like 10 years ago, going around Comic Con, all of the comics are folded over uh
Yes. Yes.
uh bond paper, and anything that is bound usually had
Fall apart.
really bad binding. So
Yes.
just looking at that for like now versus 10 years ago, like how does that feel?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is amazing because I remember when we first heard about the Tato has picked up the title, and I wasn't really thinking that anything will come of it because plans fall through all the time. Yeah, but the moment I got the complimentary copies, they look amazing. So I'm really happy about that, and I hope this is something that will
Yeah.
push people to pick up the book and read through and enjoy. The colors actually pop out in the way this is printed now, because the previous
Yeah.
edition didn't have glossy pages, but this one has
Mm.
glossy pages and the colors look amazing. Yeah.
Marvin, how does that feel like seeing that now?
When I received the book, same with Eliza. I really it really it didn't really felt true that we're going international until I received the book, because it's really in my hand now. So and I didn't realize that they're gonna make
Bigger.
it a bit bigger than the previous one by this point. So when I got it, it really felt like a different book. I actually was amazed at the art at my own art when I saw it. So it's embarrassing to say, but I really like the way that it looks now, because it's I think the 1 inch difference on both sides made a difference
Yes.
on how it looks. It looks that HD HD now, and then the art really shines through the pages. So yeah, I was overlapped, and the quality I think is really because of Tato Publishing. I think that's one of the advantages of um, 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 international publishing, because they really are looking at the quality of the book itself. I'm not saying that the local book publishing are not that good, but they have budget, they have everything, so they can control every bit of
Mhm.
the paper, the quality, the
Mm.
ink. So I think that's why this book looks really really good.
How did you get picked up by Tuttle?
I don't know. Did you know the story, Eliza?
From what I understand, they approached Nida Ramirez, who used to be the publishing manager
Yeah.
of Visprint, which has now closed its doors during the pandemic.
She's now
Um,
publishing Avenida books.
yes,
Yeah.
and she is now
Avenida.
publishing Avenida books. So they approached her to see if there are any titles that she can pitch to them for international publication. And I remember just receiving messages from Miss Nida about this. And so she sent like a number of titles and they chose, yeah, after Lambana is one of them, and a handful of my books as well. Yeah, so that was
Mhm.
really good. It's funny, it happened so fast. When we got like the contracts and we started getting just Zoom calls from like their marketing department.
Mhm.
Even then,
Mhm.
I didn't believe that this was happening, because as I mentioned earlier, we've been Mervin and I individually
Mhm.
or as a collaborator, we would get pitches for, we'll turn this into a movie or,
Yeah.
a series, pitches like that, and nothing happens after. So when we heard about this, I was thinking maybe nothing will happen. But
Mhm.
yeah, but now it's happening and the books are hitting the bookshelves, so that's amazing.
But now here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, so here we are.
Why
Yeah.
do Filipino comics tend to focus on modernizing our old mythology, do you think? Whether it happens all the time, right? Like with Trece,
Yeah.
Skyworld, like
Mhm.
I'm blanking on other names, but Manix does it too. So
You-
Yes.
yeah, so why do we keep
mhm.
going back to our old mythology?
Do you want to answer, Eliza, or
You want to
should
go
I
first,
go
Mer?
first? Okay. Good. Um, for me, as I was looking for us, because I mentioned before that I really wanted to do my own comic, and I can't just copy it. As a kid, I copy stories from anime or cartoons that I watch. But when I wanted to do my own comic, I was looking for something that really is unique. That's something that I as a Filipino that I can tell. So I think the it really the search for it really brought me to Philippine mythology because there are a lot of things that hasn't been done with it yet. It's uh, yeah, as you said, there are a lot of comics like Prese, and actually I think the first one that I read that is by Arnold Are, the mythology
Mythology
class.
class.
Mythology
So
class.
there's really a lot of interest about it, and then
And let's
I
explain to
really
people
wanted
who
to.
let's explain to people who don't know that your
Ah,
own
yeah,
comic Tabi po is
Yes.
about
yeah, yeah.
an
So
old Filipino
it's about
superstition. Yeah, old Filipino
Filipino,
myths.
specifically the aswang. Yeah, the cannibal, the what we call the monsters who eat people. So yeah, I was trying to actually as I was looking for a story I was looking for a theme in my own story. I was trying to veer away to not go to that route, but when I researched about it, I really like the mythology and the horror. Mostly, it's really horror. It's really monsters. So I really fell in love with it, and then I think I realized that for example with Japan, they really um, what do you call it? They really take inspirations from their own cultures, and they wanted to do that in the Philippines as well. So that's one of the as I was searching for an identity, I think that's where I found it. That's the mythology, and then and I realized that there's more that's not being done with it yet. So that's how I created Tabi Post, the story of my aswang. Because for example, the stories that are being done right now, the aswangs are treated as monsters that should be killed immediately by the protagonist of the story. Mostly the structure of the comics are superhero. There's a a protagonist that kills the aswang, and then I wanted to have a deeper to have a more not what do you call that to not make it just that black and white. So I wanted to create a protagonist that's an aswang, and then and you follow his story, and then you realize that sometimes the monsters are the humans. So I want that to be my theme. So yeah, there's things that can be done with mythology, with Philippine mythology. So, some of the creators really I think see that, and then they want to follow that. But I think there are downside to that, because there's gonna be um what do you call this, we're gonna be producing, if that's gonna be the way, we're gonna be producing a lot of these similar looking things. But it's a challenge, I think. I think that that's for creators, I think that's a very good challenge to make an aswang of your own, a diwata of your own. So uh, I think that's a good thing, that we're mining the our own stories, our own mythology.
Eliza,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah. So just returning to what you said about tabi po, just to explain it to an audience who may not be familiar with it, with
Yeah,
the phrase.
thank you.
It's basically asking permission from supernatural creatures
Mhm.
that you cannot see, asking permission to pass. So it's basically like, may I pass? So just thinking about that, and the phrase tao po, which we still use when we knock on the door, and that's, yeah, tao po, that means you're announcing yourself as a human being. so
Mhm.
so these folk beliefs, not necessarily
That's
are
right.
mythology.
Not a lot of Filipinos even know that. A lot of people
Yeah,
think like you're asking for a human being
for a
inside.
person. Yeah.
But,
Mhm.
but no,
Yeah.
On the
it's
other
like
side.
I am a person. I am not
Yeah,
a
I'm a
ghost.
person, please open the door. Yeah. So those kinds of beliefs are rooted in, yeah, folk beliefs, and we still do them. I grew up in a household that
Yeah.
has stories like this of the aswang, the mangkukulam, tikbalang, that sort of thing. So I don't see them as something that's separate from a reality. So those stories still enter my own stories because
Mhm.
I grew up with them. So I think that's also why Filipino creators have these elements in their stories, because they actually live next side by side with the stories that I grew up listening to. In terms of mythology, it's just personally a way for me to push, old beliefs that are no longer around to popular culture. That's what the West is also doing. I You can say that the average Filipino would know more about Greek mythologies than our own mythologies, because we don't talk about them, we don't read them really, but uh,
We
reviving
also
the
don't
stories.
have an organized
Yes.
mythology of our own, right? Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's another
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, so this is just a small way of um introducing these old gods to modern readers. Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's just a fun way to think about, I guess. It's also a challenge to me as a writer, thinking about old gods dealing with contemporary problems. Yeah, I think that's a rich source of story. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's why we do it.
What's the reception of the book been like?
Um, it's been. I mean, I can only speak about local readers in the Philippines, because I'm not,
Yeah.
because I mean, North America will get it in June, and
Have reviewers
I'm
been
not.
getting review copies though? Or no?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think they're getting review copies. Yeah, and so far it's been pretty good. Yeah, they're happy with the new format. The colors look amazing. So, yeah, that's what I know so far. But to be honest, I tend to avoid looking at looking at reviews.
Understandable. Because this is now going to be an international comic, do you feel an added responsibility to represent the Philippines with
You want to
future
start,
works? Or
Mervin?
Me? Okay. Uh, I okay. How do I answer that? I'm not really. actually, I'm always thinking as an individual. I don't think I don't want to represent something uh, other than myself. So it's
You
not
don't want to
really.
represent
I
110 million people?
I don't really.
Of various
Yes,
cultural
I don't.
backgrounds.
And, yeah. I really think about it that way. I think I want to make it uh, to make it as an individual artist rather than representing the Philippines. I'm not really into I don't know. I'm not really into thinking as representing a huge amount of people, but mhm. Because we made this comic not really thinking about the making it into an international audience. Of course, it's in English. It can be appreciated by
Mhm.
other people as well. But I also really I'm really not thinking about um, making it into an international audience. So it's really different for me. But if there are bad things that are not that you can see in the book, it's not because of the Philippine people. It's because of me. So it's my flaw. Some of it are my. If you find the drawings not really polished, it's me. It's as an individual artist. Not all Filipinos do that. But yeah, I think I can understand the question. But I'm not burdened with it. I don't think
Mm.
about it that much. When I write a story, when I do create something, I'm thinking of the story. I'm focusing on the story. I'm focusing on the artwork, on the medium, and on the comic. Not really. I'm not really thinking about the will it make money outside of the Philippines
Mm.
or no. But I'm just focusing on the story. And then I think that that follows the appreciation of our work follows because of that thinking about the the way it's gonna be received by other people. Yeah, so I'm hoping it's gonna be they're still gonna like it. So I'm still hoping, and I'm gonna go to the Goodreads or not Goodreads comment or maybe not. Yeah, but yeah.
Oh, you,
How
Eliza.
about you, Lee?
Yeah, so I think there is a way that responsibility, because we are telling stories that come from our own backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. So even though these myths and folk beliefs may not be widespread, they still come from something really important to our culture. So there is that responsibility. But I have to, I think stories like this should always come with a disclaimer. You know, the danger of the single story. I have to
Yes.
always say this is just one story. This is
Yeah.
coming from a perspective of a singular lived experience. Myself and Mervin's. Um, it doesn't pretend to represent the lived experience of
Mm-hmm.
several million other Filipinos. And this is something that I think has to be communicated to the international audience, because sometimes, you know, you'll end up in an international forum and maybe you're the only Filipino there, and then they turn to you as the Filipino expert. But I
Yeah.
have to always say, sorry, I'm talking from like a particular experience, just my own experience. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to look at other stories, and it's good that other Filipino stories are coming out. That's a way
Yeah.
to maybe widen your horizon, but there's no way that a single story can represent the lives of everybody in the
Exactly.
archipelago. Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean. I went to school. I went to college in the U.S. and
Yes.
I was the only Filipino in the whole school. And one time, one of my friends asked me, "How what's Filipino etymology? What's the Filipino language? Where does it come from?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm a math major, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
I have no idea." Okay. Um, what's next for both of you?
um for me, my we've mentioned Avenida books earlier. I have a short story collection coming out. It's a follow-up to my short story collection that came out a decade ago. So this is It's something. So I hope you can support that. The title is 17 Prayers to the Many-Eyed Mother. It's a collection of 17 stories, and I write primarily in the vein of what you see in After Lambana, so fantasy, horror, science fiction. So if you like those kinds of genres, like reading them, that's something to pick up. I also have a number of titles coming out from Tato also. I think Wounded
Nice.
Little Gods. Yeah, Wounded Little Gods is out now, and Dwellers will come out in August. So yeah, that's next for me.
Marvin?
I'm working on an animated feature film based on another comic called El Arcangel. It's
Oh, cool.
it's a comic that I produced with a friend. It's not by me. It's written and it's written by Julius Villanueva, but I animated an episode of it, and then it got not it got noticed by several things, several several people, and
Organization.
we got
Mm.
funded by Philippine what they call it uh, Film Development Council of the Philippines. So, and we also got some producers. So we're working on that. I'm working on the animation of that right now. But Tabi po is still on go. It's still gonna be the first story arc was finished, and I'm still gonna work on it. Because a lot of people are asking me about that. I'm still gonna work on it. It's still gonna push through. But right now I'm busy with the animation, and I think I'm gonna be producing um, a few comic anthology. We're working on a few, so wait for that, and follow our social media. Follow me on Facebook. Just search Mervin Malonzo. I don't have an artist page. I have a Tabi po comics page on Facebook, but mostly it's I post on my personal accounts. So Mervin Malonzo on Instagram, Mervin Malonzo Art actually on Instagram, and Mervin Malonzo on Twitter. So just follow my announcements there. But that's about it. I'm really busy on making the
Animation.
animated film, and I'm really excited about that. I really want people to to watch that already, but I have to make it first. So yeah, um,
Very
I think
cool.
that's it for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Eliza, one last question. Do you in fact write anywhere?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, but to be honest with you, not to be a downer, but it's been hard to find the motivation to do it. I think I'm still recovering from the 2 years of
Of
craziness.
shit?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but hoping to go back to writing again regularly, which I used to do before the 2 years of shit. Yes.
Everyone, after Lambana is out in the Philippines, it'll be out in North America in June.
Soon.
Congratulations. Very happy for you guys. It's a great book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the
Thank you so
show.
much.